Hi, welcome to everybody. It's Craig and Richard here, and this is the first feedback video for this course. And so welcome to all the learners, many here for the first time, but we've also got quite a number of repeat learners as well. So welcome back, and it's great to see how quickly a learning community forms, and the great dialogues and discussions that are happening on the discussion board. So we hope you're finding it really useful so far.
Yeah, Craig, it's one of my favourite things actually, seeing the learners support one another by sharing their experiences and asking questions. And there really is a sense of community that's formed, which a lot of learners have told us in the past is one of their favourite parts of the course. Just something on that, I guess there'd be a strong encouragement to share your own experiences and perhaps refrain from giving too much advice. Really, I think the learning comes from reflecting, practicing mindfulness and then reflecting on what that shows us about our own life, and then hearing other people reflect on theirs.
Yes, so we'll learn from experience and hopefully from the input from Jen and Sherelle, and we hope that you're following their comments and responses as well, because they do a great job of really helping to support those discussion boards, and also to give us a summary each week of the main topics that have come up.
That's right. And Craig, there's a fine line as well, because we are really encouraging learners to experiment with the activities and to share their observations of how their mind works, and of course as we go through the course, how we create stress and how mindfulness can help us to face difficulties. But we're also not wanting it to tip over into perhaps using the forums as an opportunity to perhaps overshare or to rely on other people for support. And of course, if any of our learners have any sort of mental health problems or become aware of any difficulties that they're struggling to face, definitely seeking professional help or further support could be a good idea.
Yeah. So let's move into some of the main topics that have come up, and questions have arisen about mindfulness. What's the difference between mindfulness and meditation? And look, we often use the two words kind of interchangeably,
yes,
because mindfulness is a form of meditation, mindfulness meditation. And
there are lots of different types of meditation.
Yeah, variations on the theme. The full stop and the comma are examples of that. But also mindfulness is a way of living. And some people think, oh, mindfulness is just meditation. That's the 5 or 10 or 20 minutes you sit in a chair and practice the meditation. But we really want to emphasise that it's the way that we live our day-to-day life and what happens when we get out of the chair. So it's very much a way of living as well.
It's about the other 23 hours and 50 minutes of the day,
that's
perhaps
right,
you could say.
Why be mindful for 10 minutes and unmindful for 23 hours and 50 minutes?
Yes.
So
yeah, and what's the difference between mindfulness and concentration? Another question that a few of our learners asked this week. And that's a really interesting question, actually, because if we look inside the brain, at the parts of the brain that are active when we're practicing different types of meditation, it turns out that there are concentration meditations. If we're focusing on the breath, for instance, and bringing the attention back when it wanders off, or if we're focusing on just tasting our food, or if we're rock climbing or in a flow state, that's concentration, where we're just focused on one thing.
Yeah.
And mindfulness, the research shows, is actually about using the senses, maybe the body or the breath or any of the senses, to stay present and being aware of what is happening in the mind and the body and what's happening around us. So we stay present and we just allow everything to come and go. So there's a subtle distinction there. And any time we meditate, of course, we're practicing both. We're practicing both concentration and that open monitoring or mindfulness.
Yes, and with that growing discernment, there's an ability to distinguish between those things that are relevant and those things that are irrelevant. So what in amongst all of this is important, and does the attention go off task? If we're mindful, we just gently bring it back on task. But sometimes we could be doing something, we notice that something relevant's happening somewhere else and our attention needs to go there, like a school teacher in a classroom talking to one student and notices that something, another student's setting a fire in the corner of the room and their
probably
attention
want to
needs to go
notice
there. That's right, it's a relevant piece of information. So.
Speaking about getting distracted by irrelevant things, some of our learners noticed that even watching the course videos, they were doing that while doing other things or getting distracted, which is such an interesting thing, isn't it?
That's right, and very good if people are starting to notice that. And of course, anything that we say on this feedback video may be going way over the heads of a lot of people who are watching, because, I don't know, maybe you're writing an assignment or answering an email at the same time, so please pay attention. And a number of also realising to focus on what is and what if.
Yes.
And the what ifing, the processes the mind gets into when worrying, getting anxious about future, takes us off the present. It's a different thing to prepare for a future event, which is focusing on what is relevant now, compared to, oh, but what if this happens and what if that happens, which is a form of worry. And
so perhaps just starting to notice that, and so it's great that some learners have started to pick that up, because that awareness of where our attention is, that meta-awareness is one of the, it's the foundation of mindfulness. We need to start noticing, where's the attention right now? Are we focused on what's actually happening, or on what might happen or what did happen in the past?
Yeah. And now, one of the big topics around default mode, daydreaming, imagination, now this is a really interesting and important issue. Now, we have this capacity to imagine, and we can use that in a kind of a mindful way if you need to do something creative. And so creativity can be a very mindful practice. Here, now, I'm giving my attention to a creative process. Now that, when we're doing that in a mindful way, there's an ability to, again, discern between those truly creative and useful ideas that are worth following and giving attention to, and those which are perhaps not so useful, like, oh, but what if I don't come up with something good, or what's everybody going to think? And so an ability to use those creative circuits mindfully is very helpful, which is different to the distracted mode of mind we go into when we're off task, we're not getting on with our study or work, we're not listening to people because our mind is off in a daydream somewhere else and we don't know it. We're doing it habitually and we don't know how to switch ourselves out of it.
Which is a great point. And if we come back to the neuroscience of it, when we're lost in thoughts of, ruminating or thinking about ourselves, or lost in daydreams, that's the default mode circuits that are active in the brain. And what we want to do is to activate the prefrontal cortex. And any time we practice mindfulness, we activate the prefrontal cortex. And if we've got that active, like you said, we don't get so lost in daydreams and worries and concerns. Yeah. And that's actually where peak productivity or peak creativity can come from as well.
Yeah. And escapism is an interesting thing too, because there's a difference between taking some time to go somewhere and watch a film and have a break from work and so on. That's not escapism, that's just varying your life and doing something different for a while, which is different to a person avoiding. A kind of escapism that's around avoidance of something that actually really needs our attention, because the mind wants to go off somewhere else because it doesn't want to pay attention. And if there is something in our life that needs attention, then it needs attention, and that's not always so easy, especially if we've gotten into a habit of wanting to escape somewhere.
So perhaps the key is just to become more aware, Craig, of where the attention is. And if we're having a pleasant daydream and there's no reason why we wouldn't be doing that, why not? Maybe we have it. And then if there is a reason to be paying attention, like we're driving on the freeway, perhaps we might want to pay attention to what we're doing.
Right. And do remember, a dream is just a dream, because it slips through your fingers before you know where it is. So trying to make it real when it's not.
What evidence is there for the attentional blink?
Well, there's quite a lot of research now, and perhaps we'll have some posted for those who are interested to read more. Attentional blink. And when we're stressed and distracted, that attentional blink can, get longer.
Up to half a second, right?
Yeah, and when we're more mindful, it shortens. Does it matter much? Well, possibly not. If you're at a social event and your attention goes from one thing to another, that little 0.2 to 0.5 of a second in your life is probably not going to be greatly missed. If you're an athlete, for example, and a cricketer, and ball's coming at you at 150 kilometres an hour...
0.2 of a second can make quite a difference, can't it?
Your attention switches to something that's happening in the crowd and then back to the ball. Well, that 0.2 of a second is the difference between that ball causing some injury, or you being able to play a shot, or if you're on the road, for example, driving a car. So it matters a lot. But when we're doing that a lot, especially, we'll come to multitasking in coming weeks, it really impairs.
Yeah. Because, of course, if we're switching our attention all throughout the day and that costs us half a second each time, that starts to add up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As we'll look at in further weeks.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And then the coma, as a way of remedying this, perhaps. First we start to notice how perhaps unmindful we are and the costs that come with that. And then we can start to practice in any moment, just bringing our attention to what we're doing, or through the practice of meditation. Yeah. As you said before, meditation just meaning attention training with mindfulness meditation, focusing the attention on what's happening in the senses. Yeah. And, some people sit for an hour, some people sit for 5 minutes. And, of course, the first practice we gave was a 1-minute practice, right? Or was it 2 minutes, I think, maybe? Yeah. Different to being in a coma, right? So,
that's right. Yeah. and if you think about it as like your periods of mindfulness are like little street lamps, street lights. And if you have those regular commas during the day, it helps to illuminate the path as you go through the day. And it makes it easier to be mindful when we go to that meeting
Yeah.
and notice more readily when our attention goes off. So it can be a great way for going into an activity, and then we leave it behind, move into the next activity. So
That's
the commas are great.
And we call it a comma because it's about punctuating the day. Full stops, the longer meditations
Yeah.
to really sort of bookend, and then the commas throughout the day just to break up the flow and to punctuate.
That's right.
Yep. How do you let thoughts pass
Yeah.
without suppressing them? Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? I mean, the mind naturally grabs hold of things, resists things, and these are just the habits, perhaps, of
Yes.
the mind that we start to notice when we meditate.
Yes.
And once we've noticed that we're holding on to something, there's the opportunity for letting it go, which doesn't mean to push it away. It just means to no longer focus the attention on it, and perhaps just to bring the attention back to the breath or the body or whatever we're doing in
Yes.
that moment.
I mean, imagine yourself if you're there's a really busy street, foot traffic happening, and you're in the middle of the footpath, and people bustling you all over the place. And it's kind of like learning to sort of sit back, maybe in a little cafe on the side, a seat, and just to,
people watch.
Yeah, just to
Just let them go
step
past.
back from the traffic, so that stuff is going past, but we're not caught up in it. In a little way, it's learning to stand back from the thoughts, the mental traffic, without necessarily being pushed around by it. And then we can choose to engage or not engage in a much more conscious kind of way. But if we get out there and we're trying to push against it and fight with it, we'll notice that we just make it even more intrusive. And it's helpful to get that sense of just observing without judging, reacting, but with non-attachment to it. It takes all practice. When we get it, it's sort of like, well, that's simple.
That's what that means.
That's really simple.
Yeah. And then with the longer practice, Craig, the body scan, some learners started getting sleepy.
Yeah.
Has that ever happened to you?
Never happened. Never. I can't believe that. I've never heard that before. Maybe it does happen on occasions
I think.
people meditating get sleepy. And that can be a sign of just some background
Tiredness that we're noticing, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily terrible. It can help us to go to sleep, but when our head gets to about 45 degrees, we'll probably stop practicing.
That's the cut-off. Yes, up to 45, keep meditating. After 45, go and have a nap.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You've stopped practicing meditation, you're now having a power nap. So, but sitting up, eyes open sometimes slightly helps us to stay awake.
Yes, straight spine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially the neck. All of those things can help.
And just working with it. That's part of the practice. Agitation on one hand and sleepiness on the other. And we're always working with those things. And the classical meditation texts talk about that at length.
And some were talking about finding it difficult to find time for 5 minutes of mindfulness in the day.
Craig, I think if you really pay attention, you'll notice that we don't have time not to practice mindfulness these days. I mean, if we spend more than half the time distracted, paying attention to other things than what we're doing, there's a pretty strong case there for actually training the attention.
Yeah.
And that's a common one, particularly in the morning when people sit down to meditate. The mind's already busy with the thoughts of the day, and the thought comes into the mind, I don't have time to sit here, I've got too many things to do.
Yeah.
But perhaps we could recognise that's just a thought. And if we treated that like any other thought and let that go, that thought that we should be doing something else, and just sat and paid attention and knew that training the attention and starting the day with some mindfulness practice would actually create a more productive, less stressful, more connected day.
And it's amazing what we do find time to practice, like worry. Up at 3 a.m. and put in a few hours of solid worry before getting out of bed in the morning.
We're pretty good at that, aren't we?
Yeah, we find a lot of time for other things that may be just 5 minutes, and just noticing that resistance to mindfulness is a part of early discovery. So it's just about time for us to finish. There will be lots of discussion around things like procrastination and multitasking, and we'll be exploring those in coming weeks, so we won't preempt too much about that. So keep following Jen and Sherelle.
Yes.
Keep fantastic discussions on the discussion boards, and we'll look forward to providing some further feedback in coming weeks. So thank you. It's been great being with you for this week.